Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Understable Discourse, your go-to place for all the best disc golf analysis and content out there on the web. Today, we're going to be looking at a quick review of the Ale Open and a couple other things that happened this past weekend. We're going to look at the upcoming weekend here with the Preserve Championship and some special things going on, especially for Simon Lizotte, and then a couple other things. So let's get into it. This past weekend, we saw a big major go down actually on the amateur side of disc golf with the United States Amateur Disc Golf Championship. And it was held on the infamous Toboggan course in Michigan, home of D-Glow, and 147 of the top amateurs in the United States got together to throw down for 3 rounds. And huge congratulations to James Collier for shooting 3 incredible rounds, especially rounds 2 and 3, to take the win and get his first official major under his belt. That's a massive achievement. We don't want to miss out on a chance to celebrate a win like that. It's a difficult course, a very, very competitive field. Big congrats to James for his win. Now, hopping across the pond over to Knoll, Sweden, we saw the second Euro Tour event go off with the Ale Open. And the FPO field for this one was pretty top-heavy, with only a few well-known, I would say, players for us over here on the American side, with Kristen Lutt, Silva Saarinen, and Anniken Sten. There were also some major competitors that we've seen before, like Rachel Turton and a few others as well. And after the first round, we saw that Kristen was clearly in the lead, which I don't think would have surprised just about anyone, but what may have surprised some people, except for those who know her personally, was Julia Fors, who was only 1 stroke off of Kristen and in second place. And if you don't know about Julia Fors or haven't heard about her yet, she's only 13 years old. Which, I mean, think about any 13-year-old person that you know, and now stack them up next to the best talent we have probably ever seen on the FPO field, and they're performing right alongside that particular person. And I think it's a real testament to her overall skill, composure, and just the general class of youth coming up in the European disc golf scene. And so in round 2, she got to play in her first ever Elite Series lead card. So huge congrats to Julia. She struggled a little bit with the remaining rounds and finished outside of the podium, but to be up there for that one round and to put on a pretty stellar performance overall anyway, beating a good portion of the field, that's a huge accomplishment. And there's a lot to be, I think, said about her skill level and where she's going to be with a future disc golf. But she's got a few years yet to go before I think we're going to start seeing her competing anywhere other than some of these localized European events. Only 4 players finished under par, as the course kind of showcased its difficulty, especially with the distance and elevation changes. I think I counted maybe only 2 or 3 holes that didn't have some kind of legitimate elevation change, whether it was up or down or going over a valley or anything like that. And in the second round, the course kind of hit hard again, yielding only 5 under par performances, chief of which was Silva Saarinen shooting 7 under par, catapulting herself from her less than stellar 2 over par first round, and she was now only 1 stroke behind Kristen, and in a position that I think she's a bit all too familiar with, of being behind Kristen and close to her going into the final round. We also had Anniken Sten only 3 strokes back of Silva, and honestly, it was still anyone's event to win with how the course was playing. Not too long into round 3, however, something became very clear, in that this was just going to be a 2-person race, as Kristen and Silva absolutely started to pull away from the field in a major way, exchanging birdies, a few bogeys, and the lead with one another. But hole 12 is kind of where things take a bit of a change. Silva catches a very, very important birdie, tying them up with only 6 holes to play. And that's when we come up to hole 14, most likely the most consequential hole of the FPO round. Kristen gets her drive to inside circle 1 at 25 feet. Silva hits kind of an early tree and puts herself in a bad position. She throws her upshot down below the basket at circle's edge, facing up towards the basket, and she hits this absolutely insane par save putt, and it kind of puts Kristen in the driver's seat here. If she can just knock down this 25-footer, that's going to put her in the lead with only a few holes left to go. So with a chance to go up by 1, she airballs the putt to in circle 2. I mean, not early circle 2, mid circle 2, when she misses that next putt, she hits a tree early on, and then she ends up hitting the next putt to take a bogey, falling one stroke back to Silva, when we thought this was going to be the hole that Kristen was going to be able to get one stroke of a lead to Silva. She ends up being one stroke behind Silva from a poor 3-putt effort. Now, Silva would keep it clean with a birdie on 15 and pars the rest of the way, giving her a 1-stroke win over Kristen and capturing her 3rd official Elite Series win. Like a lot of the other podcasts out there saying this is her first Elite Series win, it's actually her 3rd. But this is the first time that she has won an Elite Series with Kristen in the field, as Kristen was out with injury last year when she had won the Turku Open and the other Elite Series that she had won. So this is the first time she has slayed the giant that is Kristen, and I think she no doubt felt like she was in the shadow of for the last year and a half. So this is a big deal for Silva, and we saw that with like a lot of emotional tears on the 18th green after she put in her putt to win the event. So hopefully she uses this as a catapult going forward, and really showcases her ability and skills, and I'd love to see her continue to challenge the top. Over on the MPO side, they were not without their fireworks also at the Ale Open. The 3 rounds netted us really a battle between 3 people specifically, and that was Ricky Wysocki, the highest rated player in the event coming over from the United States, Niklas Antila. I don't think I have to explain to you how good Niklas Antila is, and Daniel Davidson. I think it's Davidson. I apologize if I butchered that. If you're watching, Daniel, probably not. But that'd be cool if you were. He is the returning champion from 2024 for this particular event. And early on, their rounds were really only separated by like a stroke or 2 in rounds 1 and 2. And going into round 3 is the only time we saw any real separation, with Ricky getting a 3-stroke lead to start the 3rd round. Round 3 opened up with a very unfortunate bogey for Ricky as he went out of bounds super early, but he was able to save the bogey, and in true 2-time world champion fashion, it didn't slow him down at all, as he then followed it with 6 birdies over the next 7 holes. So at this point, Ricky's lead opens up to about 4 strokes, and it just looks as if he is cruising through this course until we get to hole 9. Where just a big change would happen on the card. So Ricky would find himself off of his drive just outside circle 1, and he was looking up at the basket, throws his putt, and it lands vertically. Everyone was saying it was kind of like watching De La Viega. He had Daylad over there at LA. But it lands vertical and just rolls back down the hill past where he was at to almost double the distance that he had just putt from. And so he gets down there, lines it up, throws the putt. It hits and lands vertical again, this time rolling off to the right and into the rough, still about 50 feet from the basket. At that point, Ricky would then 2-putt to take a double bogey on the hole, and not to be, not to sit there and leave an opportunity uncaptured. Niklas went on and got the birdie on that hole, creating a 3-stroke swing, cutting Ricky's lead to just 1 stroke with 9 holes to play on this course. One of the things that was really interesting to watch in this round was that Niklas was not birdieing every single hole, but he wasn't giving up any bogey strokes, and every time Ricky seemed to miss a birdie and get a par, Niklas was right there getting the birdie. So by hole 16, they were tied, like going into hole 16. And it was at that point that the guys over at MDG Media, who I'll be talking about here in a second, we found out that Ricky was really struggling with hole 16's tee shot, switching it up in different rounds on how he approached it. And he ended up leaving his drive about 50 feet short, and he just couldn't convert the putt, which is not typically, what we see from Ricky. He's very big at hitting those clutch circle 2 putts in big moments. But Niklas got the birdie putt from near circle's edge, and on hole 17, Niklas followed that up by absolutely parking the hole, and then Ricky put himself in a position where he had to salvage a par. So at this point, you now have Niklas, who's up by 2 strokes, with a relatively straightforward par 4 to finish. It's an open shot to a large field area. You can push it as aggressively as you'd like to, but ultimately it's going to end with a shot to an island green surrounded by hazard. And so there's not much here that can happen outside of Niklas making a mistake that's going to keep him from winning this event. So both Ricky and Niklas, they take their drives And on his second shot, Ricky puts himself to just around 40 feet for a birdie putt on the island. And so we get to Nicklaus, and he kind of lines it up, and his shot comes out super low. And so on his approach, he leaves it short, and he picks up the hazard stroke by missing the island. And so now we have this really unique moment here where they're both kind of looking at their lies and trying to determine who's up first, because that really matters. Because if Nicklaus is up first, he kind of is in a position where he's got to try to make this putt no matter what. And that can become kind of dangerous because the basket's on kind of a little bit of a mound. And you got to be careful there. But if Ricky has to go first, it puts all the pressure on Ricky to make his putt, because if he doesn't, then Nicklaus only has to lay up and tap in the bogey and take the win. Ultimately, they decide that Ricky is the one who's going to go first, and we've seen Ricky in these moments time and time again where he has this massive putt that he has to hit from circle 2. The Raptor legs are getting primed up, and so I don't know if it's just the anticipation of the moment or maybe the wind or whatever, but he just puts a little bit too much on the putt, and it rises up and it catches just inches above the chains and hits the band. We hear the worst sound in disc golf, that real like shallow metal clank, and the disc does not go in. And so all Nicklaus has to do is lay it up. He does, and he takes the win, making it his third Elite Series win of the season. The major story here in round 3 for Ricky was definitely his C1 in regulation and his C2 putting statistics. One of the things that we've always known about Ricky is that he doesn't really necessarily lead the field in keeping it clean off the tee, but he makes up for it with incredible scramble rates and probably some of the best clutch C2 putts that you probably are going to see on tour. Doesn't always lead the field in C2 putting, but when it comes to putts that matter, I'm willing to bet you if you were to be able to take a statistic that shows that anytime he's in contention and he has a C2 putt, he's probably one of the best C2 putters on the planet that we've had in a long time. And in the final round, Ricky was only 44% in C1 in regulation compared to Nicklaus, who was leading the field at 78%. So almost double of what Ricky was doing was Nicklaus getting into C1 in regulation, putting himself in the driver's seat to get those birdies. So Ricky, that's still not that strange for him though. So he's putting himself in C2, and he was 100% from C1, but once he got into C2 in round 3, he was only 17%, which was the massive drop off, because in round 1 he was 60% from C2 and 50% in round 2. So that drop off there, definitely you get probably 3 or 4 strokes to Ricky's score there, and he's taking this event down. So that's a big miss on his part, not to understate how well Nicklaus played down the stretch, which he really truly did. So we're going to see if Ricky can kind of get it together going into this upcoming weekend at the Preserve, and we'll see how he does. Now, one of the things that I wanted to comment on real quick is that I was super impressed with the guys over at MDG Media. I know I'm going to be shouting out their names from the rooftops pretty much every time we have an event in Europe, because I think they do an excellent job of bringing European disc golf to the American market. One of the biggest problems that we have is that these live events on the European side are airing at times when most of us are not going to be watching disc golf. The FPO field, they're playing at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and the MPO, they're launching in the late morning, getting done sometime in the early afternoon. So if you're working, it's not really feasible. You might be able to catch them on the weekends, but it's typically a hard time to watch disc golf for most American viewers. So they have to rely on this post-produced coverage, and we're so used to being spoon-fed with Jomez all these years that having a different kind of product is hard to want to consume. Because when you look at a lot of the other post-produced groups out there, they all have their merits. You've got the guys over at GK Pro, who everything looks great, they're on great courses, they have great pros. Sometimes the commentary can feel a little bit bland because a lot of their guys are kind of, I really like Luke, I like Paul, Tall Paul Oman, but sometimes their commentary can be down here the entire time. It doesn't sound very dynamic, and if you're looking to chill out with your buddies on the couch and watch some disc golf, that's the kind of commentary you're going to get. But if you want something that's really dynamic and feels like it matches the moment of the sport, it's not quite there. You got the guys over at Ace Run Pro who I think their stuff looks pretty solid. Their commentary is good. I love their guy Conrad. I love his little zingers that he adds in. But like they don't get all the big events. Jomez is that one post-produced company that gets the big events. They have great graphics and production, and they have incredible commentary. And MDG, I think, is carving its name in that list because their production quality and their graphics package is honestly right on par with Jomez. It's almost you'd think you were watching something that Jomez produced. It's really incredible. The actual like commentary itself is amazing. What Connor and Elias are doing over there is something that I think is magical because they've not been around as long as other entities in the disc golf post-produced game, and I think in the short time they've been doing what they're doing, now they've been grinding for a while, but comparatively to the overall length of time the sport's been around and commentary in general, I think in the short years they've been around, they were able to push further in the medium than anyone did in the same time frame over on the American side. So I love what they're doing for European disc golf. And then finally, they have the best courses in the world on their coverage. The players aren't the top players all the time. The card's not full of people like Gannon, AB, Ricky, and Paul or anything like that. But they get pretty close. And the battle between Ricky and Niklas was absolutely as entertaining as anything we've seen this season. So huge shout out to MDG and what they do. I can't wait to see them get these bigger events and really get put on a showcase with some of the real big events we're going to be getting here later this season. But going back to this upcoming weekend, we're going to be traveling out to Clearwater, Minnesota for the Preserve Championship presented by Simon Line. Yeah, you heard that right. Simon Lizotte is the presenting sponsor for this event. It is the first time that a solo player has been the title sponsor for an Elite Series event on the Pro Tour. And according to him, the way that kind of worked was MVP has a lot of events this year, a lot of big time events, some elite pluses, some playoff events. And so when the Preserve reached out to MVP for them to possibly be a sponsor for it, they decided, you know what, we've got a lot on our plate. Let's reach out to Simon and see if he's interested. And he agreed on one main condition, and that's that he wanted to be able to tweak the course. So it was set up with Kayla Viska, the course designer, and agreed upon that Simon would get a say in some of the course design for the event. Now, the fun question on everybody's mind is, what happens if Simon wins this event? Is he going to be presenting the trophy to himself, on behalf of Simon Line? Here's your winner, Simon. That would be pretty incredibly funny to see, and I think Simon's the kind of person who would really enjoy the heck out of himself if he got to do that. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. The weather this weekend is looking cloudy and not like a lot of sun, a bit cold and breezy, and some rain probably for round one. So probably not the most beautiful conditions this weekend, which is something that a lot of the American pros are probably getting a bit used to recently. So hopefully the rain stays away and it's not too cold for him, that we can get some really solid disc golf. Now, when we look at the course itself, the Airborne Disc Golf Preserve was designed by Kayla Viska a number of years ago to include things like rolling hills and semi-wooded fairways, big distance, challenging water hazards, and it's made up to two separate courses, and the combination of those courses creates the Black Bear course, which is what's going to be used this upcoming weekend. Historically, we've seen the field score extremely well on this course, easily eclipsing 30 under par or better at previous events. Despite the fact that the course is pretty long, coming in at over 10,600 feet for both MPO layouts and around 9,400 feet for both FPO layouts. Yeah, I say multiple layouts because they're actually going to be utilizing multiple pin locations for a few of the holes. Now, I said to you that Simon made some tweaks. There were also some other tweaks made to the course. Let's take a quick look at what the course looks like and go through any notable changes. Hole 1 and hole 2 are the same as normal because they kind of work for two sides of the coin for pros, which is something that both Kale and Simon were big fans of. Hole 1 is a very typical, easier par 4, allowing players to have a nice big tee shot in front of the fans, a relatively easy upshot into a protected green. It should be one of the easiest birdies they're going to take on the day. And then hole 2 flips that entire thing on its head and is the polar opposite with an extremely narrow double mando into a very tight and wooded short hole. Hole 3 is where we're going to see our first Simon change, and it's adding a B pin location to the right side of where the normal pin is located. So it's going to be the same distance basically. It's just going to be off to the right, pin high to the original pin, and kind of close to a bit of a, no, I don't want to call it a drop off or a ravine, but it's definitely a bit of a ditch, and it's going to make it a bit harder if you end up too long to the right. And so the point of this, from Simon's perspective, is to challenge the field to throw the same distance but navigate a more difficult angle and get more creative into a green that just is going to make the tee shot much more important. Hole 4 had some trees cleaned up and kind of remains the same, but hole 5 is where we have our first really big change up. The old hole 5 was that short 275-foot par 3 that's kind of like a gap shot in the woods. A lot of people were kind of throwing a little bit of a slight flex forehand or a flip to flat backhand with like a nice slightly understable putter or something like that. It was not a hole that was very well liked by a lot of the players and just never really got received well. And most players said it kind of felt like it was a filler hole just to make space between other holes on the course. And yeah, it's not there anymore. Simon said we're going to get rid of that one, and they're not going to be playing that hole this year. So the players will now just simply move to where the old hole 6 is located for hole 5. So the new hole 6 takes the old hole 7, which was a shorter par 3, and extends it into a more technical par 4, requiring both a placement shot and an approach to a guarded green area. I think it's going to be a great mix-up and replacement for the old hole 5 that they're getting rid of. Hole 7 is the old hole 8, but the players are now being forced to kind of remain on the left side of the pond, where the landing zone of their tee shot becomes a lot more significant because they now have to navigate late trees to pick their desired angle. And the right side is mostly going to be OB with the exception of a safety landing zone as you get closer to the basket. Your basic plays here are to play short right and then throw the hyzer over the safety area, or you can push long and aggressive, but you're going to get close to that line of trees, but it's going to make for a much shorter approach to the basket. So we're going to see pros taking a lot of different angles at this one. I'm excited to see them play it this way because it definitely is, I think, a more creative use of the water feature here. So it's going to be exciting. Speaking of water features, the iconic hole 8 is going to remain untouched as last year's hole 9. So it's still going to be that beautiful shot over the water. We're waiting to see an awesome ace on that hole. Maybe this is going to be the year. I know Simon said that his last tournament ace was like 2017, and he's hunting for one this weekend. Hole 10 from last year is another big change we're going to have. So it's been chopped up into 2 brand new holes. One is going to be a par 3 that's going to require a very tough line that Simon is saying is basically turning it into a roller hole, because rollers are skill sets that pros should have, and so he's really excited to have this hole be kind of a roller hole, or see what people can do to get creative, because when you have this many pros attacking a brand new hole, someone's always going to find some way to break it down differently than everybody else. And then it's also going to be split up into a new technical par 4 for the second part that's been split up. And the main reason for the removal here is that the old hole 10 was just 2 boring shots, and then an upshot, and then a putt. And so they felt it was time to shake things up. Holes 11 through 15 largely remain the same. The only real difference is there's a little bit of distance added to 11's tee pad for the MPO field. But those holes were great where they were at. There was some cleanup being done about certain areas and whatnot on the fairways, but for the most part, those holes have all stayed the same. One of the only real changes on that section, and so one of the changes that you'll notice on the course as a whole compared to previous years, is that there has been some additional OB on both sides of the fairway placed. We saw this happen with the Northwest Disc Golf Championship over at Glendoveer East, when they put a lot more restrictive OB on both sides of the fairway. And this is actually a kind of an odd point of contention here regarding the course design, because when both Simon and Cale were meeting to talk about what their philosophy was about course design, one of the things they both adamantly agreed on is wanting as little artificial OB as possible, because they like the idea of holding true to that classic idea of play it where it lies, and that's not something you can do with tons of artificial OB. But the tour clearly came in and made this choice anyway, departing from some of the course design wishes made by Simon and Kale. I hope we get some kind of interview with them after the fact, and someone has the wherewithal to ask them that question. I know obviously I've got some tie into tour life and some of the questions that we bring up, and if we can get one of them on the show, I would love to ask about what their opinions are on the added OB, despite sort of their objections over the overuse of artificial OB. Hole 16 is going to be the other hole where we're going to see a multiple pin location, with the original pin being pin A and a new slightly shorter pin at the front of the mound they typically played at the top of as the B pin. Holes 17 and 18 are remaining exactly the same, which is, I think, a good thing. Hole 18 is historically a very, very interesting finishing hole for a course like this. It yielded 50 eagles last year, and I think it's probably the best scored hole on tour. Definitely probably one of the best, easiest hole 18s, but maybe across the board one of the best. We'll have to check when we look into the holes at the end of the year this year. But coming into hole 18, anything from like a 3 to an 8 is possible, which makes it really interesting because two-stroke swings are a reality on the hole and always keep people in contention going down on the stretch of the last final hole. So given what we talked about with the course, winning at the preserve, I think, requires a combination of distance, solid C2 putting, and just overall endurance to be able to maintain your level of play over that distance of a course, and just, being able to make good, smart decisions, attack where necessary. And like I said, that C2 putting, I think, is going to come in clutch. For the FPO side, my predictions are pretty straightforward. I think Kristen's going to win the whole thing. I think Holland Hanley's going to take second, and I think Missy Gannon's going to take third. And I don't really have a lot to explain those picks. I know it's incredibly chalky, and I understand that. This course is, all about getting on the board and scoring, and these three are the best FPO the game has to offer when it comes to that particular skill set. Yes, Silva did just have a win over Kristen in Europe. I don't know that the distance here really suits her game. If Paige Pierce were playing this event, I might have slotted her into third over Missy, but she's not, so we're not going to be doing that. But I think that Kristen, Holland, and Missy are going to be your 1, 2, 3. It feels like it's really cheap to say that, but I don't know if I see any other way this going down. Speaking of people not playing this weekend, another notable absence is going to be Paul McBeth, who I think is likely taking some time to focus up for the major season coming up and just work out some of his recent kinks. We saw just some real struggles in rounds 3 and 4 over at in Oregon, and I think he needs some time on the drawing board to sort of separate himself and think about things. Paul historically has always been a player who likes to plateau right around the major season, and that's what's coming up. So we'll see what he does, but he will not be playing this weekend. For the MPO results, I'm going to predict Simon Lizotte taking third place here. There's a lot of pride, I think, in this event coming from him, and what this is going to do to for his for all of his work with Simon Line, with him, manipulating the course a little bit. I think there's just going to be a lot of personal pride of I want to play this well. So I've got Simon taking third place. In second place for me, I'm going with Gannon. Feels like a safe pick, but I'm not really ashamed to say it. And coming in first place for me is going to be Ricky Wysocki. I mean, I know this past weekend was tough for him with that loss, and we talked about his putting in C2 not really being there in round 3, but we saw great flashes of Ricky Wysocki of old in rounds 1 and 2, and he was great for the first half of round 3, and that's kind of when he fell off a little bit. But here's the thing, though. The Preserve might as well just be named the Wysocki Open, because he's won 3 of the last 4 years here, and I just think he's the outright favorite to get the win on this course, even with the changes, and I can see him getting it done, so it's hard to not pick him here. I've been saying it for the last several weeks that I think Ricky's been kind of gearing up and getting better and better and better and better and better leading up to this event. I think this is where he gets his first win of the year. But what do you think? I mean, do you disagree? Do you agree? Do you have better picks than I do? Put them in the comments below. I'd love to hear who you think is going to win the event. And if you disagree with me or agree with me, I think it's great to have discourse. That's why we call this Understable Discourse, because I want to know, what your opinions are. Going over the Hold My Bag picks for the week, which is, like I've told you before, it's kind of like it's a tier-based game where you pick players from 5 different tiers based upon their standings on the tour right now, and then your players earn you points. At the end, you see how well you did. It's a lot of fun. It's free to play, and you could win some pretty sick gift cards. So I'd recommend going over to holdmybag.com, making your picks, and tell me how you do. Let's see who wins. You, me, what do you got? But for this week, I'm sticking to my guns with Ricky and taking tier 1, taking Ricky in tier 1 and Simon in tier 2. Going into tier 3, I'm going with Ezra Aderholt here. I think he's a really solid pick. I know he's did not play well at all this past weekend in Europe, and he's been bouncing back and forth and maybe has some jet lag going on. But he's got all the distance you need for this course. He's a Circle 2 menace. I see him playing well this weekend. At least I see him playing better than the rest of tier 3. For tier 4, I'm taking a sleeper pick here with Robert Burridge. He's not someone that we've really heard a lot from this year, but I like how he matches up with his skill set with the course. I'm gonna throw a flyer out there with Robert Burridge. And then for tier 5, this feels like a no-brainer when you look down the list of the tier 5 guys. It's Harry Chase all day. Harry's got everything you need here. I really like to see a great event from Harry, and I think he's going to do it. But that does it for us today on Understable Discourse. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all your time and your support. And if you want to support our channel, the best way you can do that is by liking the video, hitting subscribe down below, and throw a comment in the comments. Tell us what you like, what don't you like, what do you want to hear about? Who am I crazy? Let me know. But otherwise, go watch some disc golf this weekend. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, see you later.